Winning yet? Welcome everyone. I hope you're able to hear. Unfortunately, the sound is not going to be fantastic. I'm going to have to get a additional microphone. This will do though. And first of all, it's a great day. It's a great day to see the God Emperor ascend to the cherry blossom throne. It's not a surprise, as you can probably tell from the shirt. We knew we knew that Donald Trump had the ability to win because he was the only candidate who was addressing the concerns of the American public. He was the only candidate in either party who was paying any attention to the needs of the American people and the nation as a whole. And now I have to admit that I did not think of Donald Trump as being a particularly good candidate. I warned people from the very beginning that he was the only candidate as opposed to being a particularly good candidate. He's not a conservative. He's not alt-right. And so there's a lot of us who might be a little bit more to the right, might be a little bit more conservative, might be a little bit more religious, and we all had our doubts. There's a reason why people were, Christians and evangelicals tended to lean towards Cruz. Obviously the establishment wanted to see Jeb Bush and so forth. But the important thing is that he is the one thing that none of the other candidates were, which is he's a nationalist. He is clearly someone, and has clearly been someone through the entire course of his campaign, who was focused on the interests of the American nation, the American people. Now, what I want to talk about today, and I listened to that speech today and I was blown away by it. It was not only a better speech than I expected, it's a better speech than I would have written. I was expecting something a bit more conciliatory than it was. I was expecting something a bit more generic. And so what I wanted to see was that at least he was not going to back away from his campaign promises. By the way, we're celebrating here with Prosecco, so the good stuff. Now, I went over his speech and I highlighted 10 things that I thought were significant. And, right from the start, it was very clear that he was beginning with a message that was very different than any normal politician, very different than the establishment. And so, and the most important thing was right from the beginning, he said, we're transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. And that was an acknowledgement that for the last however many years, since 1973, maybe dating back, you can set the date wherever you want. But the point is that he was recognizing that too much of the sovereign American people's power has been stolen by the establishment, has been stolen by the bifactional ruling party, and he was making it clear that that was not appropriate. That was not that was not the way that the country was founded. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And so and then he went on to say, the second important thing he said was, the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our countries. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And that's absolutely true. My background's economics. Some of you have read the History of the Great Depression, or the Return of the Great Depression. Some of you might have read my book on free trade with James Miller. And the conventional economic wisdom is that if we open up trade and we I'll open everything up to the world, that everyone's going to be better off. And it's not true. It's absolutely untrue. Their victories, their triumphs, their wealth has not benefited most of the people in the country. It's made them worse off. what a lot of people don't realize is that the average American wage in real terms is lower than it was in 1973. Okay? Also, the United States is not wealthier than it used to be. In fact, we're much poorer because you don't calculate wealth by average national income. You calculate wealth by dividing assets by debt. And since the debt is much, much higher than it was, America's wealth has been depleted. It's gone. And so Donald Trump, in his inauguration speech in front of the entire nation, was acknowledging those two very important truths. Then he went on to say a nation exists to serve its citizens. And he talked about what Americans want: schools, safety, and jobs. And what was fantastic about it was that he said these are just and reasonable demands of a righteous people and a righteous public. So what he's saying is that what normal people want, what you want, what I want, these are all just and reasonable demands. Okay, we're not being unreasonable when we say that we want those things. And so, he was recognizing the basic needs of the American people. And then the fourth point that I noted: from this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. Now that's totally appropriate. That's absolutely appropriate. He is the elected leader of the American people, and obviously he should be putting America first. But the reality is that is a new vision, because that is not the vision of Barack Obama. That's not the vision of George Bush. We have not had a genuinely pro-American president since Ronald Reagan. And even Ronald Reagan was very susceptible to the arguments of the globalists. Now, granted, because of the Cold War, he had something, possibly, you could argue, more important issues to deal with. But the reality is that even Reagan's vision, the Morning in America vision, was not as powerful a vision as Ronald Reagan's vision was. And so, so that is amazing. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a prediction. I believe, contrary to what I had been thinking 6 months ago, when I believed that Trump would win, but would be a mediocre president who would hopefully build a wall and cut immigration. I mean, I figure if he just does those two things, we're head and shoulders above anything else. But I think it is entirely possible at this point that Donald Trump is going to go down as a great president. It's too soon to tell. It's far too soon to tell, but the distinct possibility is there. The vision is there. Now, he went on with the fifth point I wanted to note is he said, we'll follow two simple rules: buy American and hire American. Now, there's depth to each thing he says here. What he's saying right there is an end to free trade, an end to all the NAFTA BS and whatnot, and it's probably also going to be an end to the H-1Bs, which is the visas, by which the technology companies have basically eviscerated high-tech employment among Americans and significantly reduced the wages. So that was, I think, an indicator of what is likely to come soon. A huge point then was the point 6. We defended other nations' borders while refusing to defend our own. And he said, we will unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. So again, what he's saying there is he is willing to recognize the actual enemy. But he's also saying that the first focus is going to be America, defending America's borders and defending American people, and defending them from the ongoing legitimate threat of the third great wave of Islamic expansion since 700. And so, it's going to be interesting here. I'm a little bit concerned that it's going to be possible to get trapped into some sort of neoconnery, and obviously how you execute is more important than saying the right thing. But saying the right thing is a good start. And also the fact that he is fostering better relations with Russia means that combating radical Islam, combating Islam, Islamic expansion throughout Europe and into America and so forth, is not necessarily America's job. Russia is perfectly willing to deal with it, as they've shown in Syria. And so sometimes the USA simply has to get out of the way. So, China has its own issue with the Muslim Uyghurs, or however you pronounce that. And so, there's a lot of possibilities out there that the neocon vision of we will conquer the world and turn everyone into liberal Democrats did not allow for. So that was worth noting. I was vastly amused by this next point. It's not particularly significant except for rhetorically, but what cracked me up was they said the time for empty talk is over. Now is the hour of action. And the reason I thought that was so funny is that action was the theme often of the historical Italian fascists. And so I detected the fine hand of Steve Bannon basically giving the SJWs and academic left something to scream about. So that was pretty funny. But again, it's keeping with the theme that he understands talking the talk is not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. Action is required. He knows that, and so he's making it clear that we are going to be able, we are expected to call him out, and we're expected to demand results from him. And the thing about Trump, and this is one of the things that is most exciting about him as a leader, is the fact that he demands results. He is not a micromanager. He's not going to try to fly over to Saudi Arabia and solve the problem himself. He delegates, and he puts effective people in. I mean, keep in mind, the guy went through 3 campaign managers and still won. What that means is that he understands that even a good person that he likes and trusts is not necessarily the right person for that job at that time. And you can bet that it doesn't matter if it's Mad Dog Mattis, it doesn't matter if it's Flynn, it doesn't matter who it is. He's shown with Chris Christie that he is willing to take somebody that he likes and trusts and take them out of the picture and put someone else in simply because the first person has not been getting their job done to his liking. And again, that's very different than Ronald Reagan, who had a bad tendency to turn things over to people like Jim Baker, who would turn around and go and do something that Reagan didn't want and not be held accountable for it. So I really think that there's some really good signs that this is going to be a very successful administration. Again, no guarantees, but all we can judge by are the current actions, and the initial actions, the initial steps that he's been taking have been really impressive. And finally, the fourth thing he said, or the fourth one I was saying, the eighth thing he said that I wanted to note, and this is the most positive thing, and I thought it was kind of interesting because, not that I was involved in the speech writing, of course, but it echoed something that I said in my previous Periscope. He said, there should be no fear. We are protected, and we will always be protected. We will be protected by the great men and women of our military and law enforcement. And most importantly, we will be protected by God. Now, I'm a Christian, and so obviously that resonates with me. But it's such a strong and powerful statement against the inveterate secularism, the globalism that is constructed on fear, that's constructed on threats, and constructed on the idea that if you don't do what the globalists demand, that you're going to be left behind. And so, it's easy to fear. Most governments rule by fear. Most politicians build their campaigns based on fear. And so, to see Donald Trump up there, Donald Trump, who's not a religious man in general. He never has been. But to see him very straightforwardly quoting the Bible, Paul talking about you're not given a spirit of fear. Donald Trump is saying, Americans, you should not be afraid. Don't be afraid. And so I think that it's really encouraging. And again, Donald Trump is clearly stating that he is not going to move forward in the same direction that we've seen the nation moving. He's got a new vision, and it is much more in line with the foundations of Western civilization. And I think that's incredibly encouraging to us over here in Europe. That's incredibly encouraging to Americans. It should be incredibly encouraging to people in Asia and Europe and so forth, because they all need Western civilization to be confident, to be strong, and most of all to survive and persist, so that it can continue to bless the world with its fruits of technology and everything else. So now there were 2 points that I will say that I felt were not negative, but the 2 things that I was a little less keen on. First of all, I thought he missed a huge moment, a huge applause moment, and missed making an important rhetorical statement, was when he said, we will build new roads and highways and bridges and airports and tunnels and railways all across our wonderful nation. And I was waiting for the next line, and we will build a big, beautiful wall. We didn't hear build the wall, and that's what I think everyone was waiting for. Now, I'm not worried. I don't think that signifies that he's going to renege on his promise in that regard. But I do think that it was a missed opportunity. I think we would have heard a huge applause and a huge roar if he had said that. I wish he had. But like I said, still a much, much better speech than I was expecting. The other thing I wasn't terribly keen on, but I understood, and I expected, frankly, I expected more of this, was the civic nationalism. Trump is a nationalist, but he's a civic nationalist, which means that he doesn't necessarily subscribe to the alt-right perspective that identity trumps ideology, that identity trumps civic patriotism. And so, and that was the part where he said, never forget that whether we are black or brown or white, we all believe the same red blood of patriots. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I personally find that stirring. I have a, somebody said that would have only served to further, no, I'm not saying that he should have said anything related to identity politics. That would have been a very foolish thing to do in that circumstance. I'm simply saying that civic nationalism is functionally dead. It's been killed by demographics in the United States. There is no civic nationalism anymore. It's not functional. And so, it doesn't hurt to throw out a few feel-good words there. And I have no doubt that, a civic nationalist like Trump wants to believe that. I want to believe that, But the problem is it's no longer the case anymore. Once you have an invasion of 65 million foreign nationals, there is no civic nationalism. All you need to do is talk to, go down to Southern California and talk to the people waving Mexican flags there. Go to the Orthodox neighborhoods in New York. Go to the Muslim neighborhoods in Detroit. They're not civic nationalists. They're not the same nation. They have their own nation. They're proud of their own nation. They're proud of their own people. A nation is people. Now, again, this is a minor point, because in that, it is not the in that situation when you're speaking to the entire people and you're just starting off, the point is not to speak the harsh truths. I mean, frankly, people were saying, "Oh, this is the darkest inauguration speech ever," blah blah blah, and so forth. And what that meant is that he was speaking more truth, more harsh truth to the people than anyone would have expected. And I thought it was a great speech, a fantastic speech, definitely a indicator that the Trump administration is on the right path. It's off to a great start, and it won't surprise me at all if we find out that these first executive orders that he has signed are more significant than any of us are suspecting. So we're at the 20-minute mark, so I'll take 2 or 3 questions, preferably about the inauguration, preferably about Trump and the administration. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and fire them away. In the meantime, let's see. Thoughts on the website scrub? I have no idea what you're talking about there. Best presidential speech I've heard in my 47 years on this planet. I agree with that. I've never heard a better one myself. Let's see. Are the riots being covered in Europe? Yeah, a little bit. They're actually probably being covered more than they are in the States. There was on the TV, there was, the car burning on fire and that kind of stuff. I, to be honest, haven't been paying much attention to it. I've been busy. But they're definitely not afraid to cover that here. So, let's see. Anyhow, his construction projects for job creation, well, hopefully he's going to build a wall. Let's see. Levine says nationalism equals national statism. That's ridiculous. Levine is, he's got the usual problem. Like most Jews, he's not a fan of nationalism because he views it as a threat. So I wouldn't pay any attention whatsoever to what he says about that. It's not true. And statism doesn't require nationalism of any kind. In fact, statism, anytime you have a multicultural, multinational state, then you have to have statism because that is how one group manages to control the other. So it's complete nonsense. So, okay, one more question here. What do you think his foreign policy looks like? I see mixed messages and fear neocon influence. Yeah, I think there are some concerns on that score. However, I'm not too concerned about that because he sent many, many clear messages, even just in that speech, that the concerns are going to be America. America first, and American national interest. The whole neocon campaign to remake the world and end history and build liberal democracies for the banks, around the globe, that's over. So, that's one reason why the deep state is so upset, and that's why they're going to be, probably fighting Trump at every step along the way. And I have no doubt that he's going to clean house. So, anyhow, thanks very much. And like I said, the theme was the end of the world as they know it. So, it is the end of the world as the neocons knew it. It is the end of the world as the globalists knew it, and that's a wonderful thing. So let's just raise a glass to the God Emperor, and long may he rule. Thanks for coming.